Hello, and welcome to another fully live episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinzie. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and today we're going to talk about the security news of the week, as well as talking about a little bit of cloud security. So I've talked a little bit about cloud security before, kind of going over the shared security model, but I'm actually going to do a little demo on what happens when that cloud security, shared security model breaks down and somebody does something that exposes information they weren't anticipating. So we've also got plenty of news to cover today, and Killian is not going to be with me today. He is off enjoying some cake somewhere, I think. He's on vacation, so I hope he's having fun. And it's just going to be me and all of you. So good to see everyone in the chat. Hello, Kat and Dallas. So let's go ahead and get started. In this case, I'm going to talk about what might happen if somebody was using cloud services to build an application that was vulnerable. And we're going to pick a type of vulnerability today. And this type of vulnerability we're going to cover is going to be an OS command injection vulnerability. So this is going to be a case where we have an application or a server that's running on in a cloud environment. And it is basically using like a bash script or something else to query a database and get information that we are providing to a user. Now, that's all well and good, but if we're using something like a bash script to send information or execute information in an operating system, then we need to be really careful and sanitize any sort of information that might be coming in from a user. Any data that's coming in externally from a search function or a form or anything like that needs to be sanitized before being passed off to the next stage of the process. Otherwise, we could potentially inject something malicious. So let me give an example. There's a lot of cases where if it's not properly sanitized, you might be able to pass like a malicious system command like rf-m or something like that that deletes a bunch of data by using a upload feature to send a file that is named as a malicious system command and then get a server to actually execute that command when it's not supposed to. Really classic way of doing this. And today we are going to use some of the tools we talked about in a previous episode. This time is going to be Burp Suite in order to exploit this vulnerability. So I really like this lab. I think it's super cool. And I'm going to show it off on my screen here. There we go. So I know I have mentioned Portsrigger Academy before. I really stand behind it as something that is worthwhile for checking out. And in this case, I looked up some of the most common vulnerabilities that come up in cloud environments. And one of them is OS command injection. Now, again, what that means is that we have a vulnerability here that allows somebody to upload or inject information into our server that is going to be passed on and not sanitized properly. So that means us sneaky hackers can intercept the web request that's going from us to the server and modify it in ways that allow us to potentially get it to give us information it's not supposed to, or even give us full control over the underlying operating system, which for a hacker is kind of the best case scenario here. So if you want to follow along, this is the OS command injection simple case lab on the Portsrigger Academy. I have not covered this one before, and I think it's really cool because it goes to show if you know a little bit about Linux or command line, then you can really get a lot done here. So, all right, if you want to see what it looks like, I can click on Access the Lab, and I think I might need to log in again. We'll see. It requires me to constantly log in, and sometimes it also goes down. So Portsrigger Academy was actually my inspiration to write the Damn Vulnerable Nugget, which is a local version of one of these vulnerable web servers that allows you to practice all sorts of fun authentication things. And in this case, we can see our vulnerable web application, and we can click around here. But if I go to view details, I can see that the particular thing we're interested in is this stock database checker. So I can click on check stock and a web request goes out. And that web request allows us to potentially modify what's going on in the backend by putting in some variables here that break the system that's set up. So there's lots of ways of checking this out. I think like one of the easier ways is I can hit inspect. Wow, that's a lot. And then network. And then I need to, this is so, no, get down. So if I send another request here, I can see a packet goes out. This is a post request, and I can see the contents of this request is pretty simple. I can see out that this this is so small. Sorry, let me make it larger. For everybody that's on a mobile device, I feel you. So I'm going to pull this up. So we're taking it more. And this is the actual request that went out. We can see that it's HTTP request, content length. We can see other information. Sorry, we can see the refer. And basically, we're trying to see any information we can manipulate here. So this is just in a regular web browser. We can't really manipulate this in the web browser. We would need to take kind of an extra step that I don't want to here. So instead, what I would like to do, so some more information there. So instead, what I would like to do is open up this exact same thing, but in Burp Suite. So let's go ahead and do that and see if we can pass this lab and show off how a cloud vulnerability is actually kind of discovered. Because last week we talked about actually I think it was the week before, we talked about some unique Varonis research using Burp Suite. So let's go ahead and use the community edition and see exactly how that works. All right, so I have this here. This is how it looked when it first starts up. This is the free community edition. And I know I complain about this, but really the constraints only kick in if you're doing brute forcing. A lot of the other very clever tools you're still able to use. So I think that's fine. So I'm going to start Burp. Now, there's a lot of ways of doing this. And I see some people using like browser plugins like Foxy Proxy and stuff like that. I believe that is the correct way to do this. However, I would like it to just be convenient. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to go into the proxy and click on open browser. I bet it will open in the wrong screen, but we'll see. Yes, of course it did. So, all right, we've got the proxy window. And here I can now type in the URL of the lab that I want to do, and everything will be intercepted, and I'll be able to see a list of all the different packets that are flowing through here. So let me go back to my academy. Is this it? No, this is it. Okay. So I'm going to go to this OS command injection, and I'm going to have to log in, which is lame, but we'll do it. All right, so I'm going to paste this here. And it's going to go very slow. Yep. I'm going to try to access the lab. And of course, now that I'm in a new browser, oh, it's letting me do it. Okay, cool. I'm already logged in. That's great. Okay, so wow, I'm like amazed that worked. All right, so I'm going to click on intercept is on. And what this means is every time I post a request, I'm going to have to basically approve it and forward it. And I can also modify it before doing so. So I'm just getting pings right now. I'm going to forward those. That's fine. But let me go ahead and click on view details. And basically, you notice how nothing's happening. That's because I'm proxying everything. So I have to forward them. And here's the get request. I need to approve that. And I'm basically doing this step by step so I can make sure that anything coming from my side, oops, sorry, hit the mic. Anything coming from my side is going to have, like any modifications that I want included. So I'm going to continue forwarding them. And now I can see from browser perspective, I've now gone to the website I wanted to go to. Again, it will not load until you kind of enable that. So I'm going to click on the check stock. And here I can see exactly what I'm looking for. So this is the web request, the post request that has all the information necessary. And I wonder if I can make this, can I make this bigger? No. Okay, no, I absolutely can't. Okay, well, that's disappointing. But yeah, so this is all the information necessary for me to mess with this post request. And at the very bottom, I can see product ID equals 1 and store ID equals 1. Let me see if I can actually make this larger, because I know a lot of people do watch this on mobile devices, and it's kind of difficult to see if it's not bigger. Wow, this is a lot of completely unrelated settings that I don't care about. Okay, well, it seems like the creators of Burp Suite do not care about making this bigger. Okay, well, thank you for all of that. How does Command+++ not make it bigger? What? Okay, my criticisms of Burp Suite continue. Yuck. Sorry, I think that if you got to make it bigger, it should be really easy. All right, well, if somebody knows how to make Burp Suite larger, then I would be happy to make it bigger for everyone. But going to work with this as it is. All right, so let's say that we identify a packet of interest. And here I can take this and I'm going to forward it, but I can go back and see all these requests that were made. In this case, I want to do the last request that was made. So, oops, right, that does nothing, right. So I can hit the time of the request and kind of sort everything by that, which is cool. Let's see, and I'm looking for a post request. Oh, right. And this is everything kind of sorted by website. So I don't know why YouTube is included in here, but that's really great too. All right. So I can see in the HTTP history. Okay, this is a little bit better. So I'll just sort this by time the other way. Where's my post request? Okay, I think this is it. No, that's to YouTube. What? All right, sorry. So live demos are always fun. Am I gonna have to make another post request because it's not showing me? Okay, here, this is the, okay, I'm just gonna make, okay, here it is. This is the post request. I don't know why it made subsequent post requests to YouTube, but there we go. That was also proxy, but this is the one we want to mess with. All right, so in Burp Suite, if we want to mess with a packet and we decide that it's interesting, we can right mouse click it and then send it to the repeater, and then the repeater blinks ominously. So this is the repeater. What's cool about it is it's kind of divvied up all the different parameters on this side that we can mess with. So if I'm a cloud security researcher and I want to mess with the back end of a server, then I can start kind of messing with these server parameters. So here we can see in the body of the request, there's two different parameters, product ID and store ID, and there's values here. So I can replace these values with whatever I want. Now, supposing that I know or suspect that a bash script is running this whole thing in the background, so I'm going to be able to pass basically a system command to this, then if I am supplying a variable in a system command in something like a bash script, then I can use certain characters to basically end one command and then start doing another command. So an example in bash scripting is the and character. So, or the pipe character is another one. So these commands will kind of terminate one running command and then allow you to chain another command that maybe runs after the first one is done. And that means that we can manipulate an operating system that's not properly sanitizing these commands before it runs them. So if we wanted to do something like this, I could take the variable, the value one here, and instead, let's make it, and who am I? So the who am I command in Linux is something that will allow us to get the username of whoever is running the system. So whatever user is logged in. So if I press enter, then it will replace a URL formatted version of this and allow me to then send this and get, let's see, who am I? Let's see, there is a, okay, well, first of all, we're getting an error in our bash script. So already we've revealed that there's a bash script here. There's an unbound variable. Who am I? Extra operand 1. Okay, cool. So if I then need to potentially solve this problem, I might be able to then add a quote here, or like a ampersand here, in order to, or a hashtag, one might call it, in order to make it so that the script also comments out the next part. So let me see if that then yields better results. Okay, so what did we do here? So my end result, if you can't see it, I understand it's very small and it will not get larger no matter what I do. But oh yeah, it kind of amplifies it here a little bit. I added the and symbol, and then who am I, the command that I want to run on the backend system, and then the pound sign here is basically making all the rest of the script a comment. So, okay, I can run arbitrary commands on this server. That means that I'm able to touch the backend operating system and start messing with it. So I also could run this on the second ones because I'm kind of like canceling out the second part of the bash script that's trying to like get stock information. But essentially what I'm doing here is I'm taking this post request that is supposed to interface with the to get the current stock amount of a particular item. And instead, I am commenting out the second part of the bash script and running arbitrary system commands. So let's say that I want to learn more. So I can type ls, and now instead of running the first part of the script or the second part of the script, it is just going to run the ls command and return it. So ls allows us to list various files that are in the same directory. And in this case, we can see stockreport.sh is the file that's in this directory that we have access to with this command injection. So if I want to then see what's inside this bash script that we're up against, I can actually extract the script that is running in the background on the server with this exploit. So let me go ahead and type cat stockreport.sh. Now, the idea here is we've identified that there's a bash script running in the background. If I send this, okay, here we go. We're using the cat command to output the contents of this bash script. So we can see the entire bash script, which, by the way, is vulnerable. So we use this command, sorry, we use this OS command injection to basically rummage around in the back end and figure out exactly what script is controlling this web application. So super fun lab. I thought this was just enough for me to learn how to use some of the primary features of Burp Suite, specifically modifying the various like variables in the post request. So by capturing the post request, messing around with some of the variables, and trying out some really simple commands like OS injections, who am I to prove that you have access, and then listing files, and then finally extracting the bash script that's actually running the entire server. This demonstrates how when you have something like the shared responsibility model, if someone chooses to run an application in an insecure way, it could end up granting access to the underlying operating system and make it so that hackers can extract all sorts of stuff. So this is a pretty severe vulnerability. Like, this obviously has like unsanitized input. There's lots of stuff wrong with this. But in the scope of cloud security, like, this is a pretty common misconfiguration. It's something that versions of this happen all the time. So we're going to do more different security labs. I wanted to do one where I'm actually using the tools. But if you're just getting started with Zap or Burp Suite, then this is a great lab that I really recommend. So check out Portswigger Academy for this specific lab. It's free and you can check it out, and it works most of the time. Sometimes the labs are down. That's why I made my own local version one time. And I might end up making a local version for this one as well. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with the news this week. So a lot of stuff has happened per usual. And this time I want to do the headline first. This is one where hackers are kind of going after other people who are seeking illicit software and providing them with none other than Luma Stealer. It's always Luma Stealer. It's just inevitable. So in what way are people being infected with Luma Stealer this week? Well, now a notorious financial hacking group, Fin7, is trying to target people who are using AI-powered Nudify websites. So these promise free trials, and when you upload your photos and try to get the result, it requires you to download something, which is, of course, in fact, just Luma Stealer. So this uses mostly SEO and fake websites to get people excited about the concept of nudifying random people's photos. It doesn't provide any sort of guarantees or privacy or anything. So people who want to do this in a sketchy way and just like, do a search to try to find a website that will do it, generally will find one of these scam websites and become part of the Luma Stealer network. Now, of course, this can load all sorts of bad things on your computer. It's basically another financial gain for these criminals to be able to infect your computer and then sell access to your device to other third parties. So avoid these websites. Obviously, I think that it goes without saying that you probably shouldn't be on them in the first place. But because they have been such a popular thing for people to search for, it remains a way that a lot of devices are getting compromised, and a very clever attack, I have to say, when it comes to optimizing SEO and putting up phishing websites. Now, most of these URLs have been taken down. But these websites included things like ainude.ai, which seems a little redundant, easynude.website, and nude-ai.pro. The model here was basically that all of these would include some sort of free trial. And I mean, if you're looking at ways that people would get compromised that you wouldn't expect in an organization, like, these are the sorts of scams that get all sorts of random people who you wouldn't expect. So this is probably, I think, some of the craziest news of the week is that this has become like a very, I guess, profitable way of infecting a bunch of devices and then selling access to other hackers who have malicious payloads they want to run, like ransomware gangs or other people with a financial stake in the game. So here you can see what it looks like to download the supposed result of a photo conversion, we'll call it. But when you download this and unzip it, instead, it will do all sorts of terrible things to your computer, depending on what hackers pay for. So I mean, I feel like, again, I don't really need to tell people to stay off these websites, but in particular, if you know anyone who might be vulnerable to this, you might want to discreetly tell them to avoid these sorts of websites because they are increasingly a common attack vector for hackers looking to infect lots of devices. All right, so our next piece of news has to do, again, with Kaspersky being effectively kicked out of the US market. We talked about, I think it was either last week or the week before, how they had surprised users by switching their product over to some other random software. So people woke up the next day and found that their VPN and their antivirus had been switched over, in some cases without any notification. Kaspersky insisted that they had notified customers, but it was very, very confusing for a lot of people who found a new VPN service routing their traffic in the morning, which is frequently the sign of an attack. So it panicked many people. So in this case, it looks like the Google Play Store removed access to Kaspersky products on the, Google removed access on the Google Play Store to Kaspersky products in accordance with restrictions on who they can do business with, according to, I think it was the U.S. Department of Commerce's Bureau of Industry and Security. So that means that I guess Google may no longer be able to do business with them, and that includes listing them on the Google Play Store. So Kaspersky's complete withdrawal from the U.S. market seems to be kind of in its final stages, with them being removed from most software platforms that people would find their products on. All right, so video game development news. Outlast game developers, Red Barrels, yes, the Red Barrels, is announcing that the development of their, I think it's actually their fourth installment, but it's the third version of Outlast, is going to be seriously delayed after a cyber attack. Nobody is claiming responsibility for this yet, but it says that it was a hit on their production timeline, and this generally implies ransomware or some sort of file deletion or destruction. So, I mean, if it was just a data leak, probably we would have heard about that. But in these cases, you never really know who's responsible until someone comes forward, as the negotiations typically happen in private. Next up, this is kind of a crazy story. Somebody figured out how to generate licenses that allowed for all sorts of expanded access to the hardware that a company was selling. And these were very expensive routers that are designed for like critical situations. So these are going to be used in government, all sorts of areas where they need super reliable, heavily tested hardware. So the business model is kind of like, some of you guys might have heard of, like, you know, cars where you need like a subscription model to turn on the heated seat, like seat warmer or like something like that. Well, in this case, the model was, you know, they sell the hardware and then you pay for a kind of expensive software license in order to unlock various aspects. Now, the person who was charged here found a way to generate fake licenses, and this allowed for them to sell those licenses that unlock the product to do all sorts of things that are normally very expensive for significantly below market value. Now, that I think earned them several $1 million. Oh, but let's see, causing between $5 million and $365 million in financial losses. That seems like kind of a wide margin, but either way, they were able to make a bunch of money by undercutting the legitimate software licenses and selling to various people who had the hardware already and wanted to unlock it fully. So, I mean, the business model of like selling things that are locked down via software is always a little bit sketchy, because if somebody figures out how to unlock it, then they can either release it for free or they can make a lot of money off of your customers by selling that, if that is the primary way you choose to make money. Software unlocks are always kind of risky. So, I mean, in this case, like, it's kind of unclear what type of security this guy had to go through in order to provide this unlocking service. But this is an interesting segment of the cybercrime market, like people who figure out the algorithm that created a code or a key or something that unlocks a product and then sell that for a profit. Obviously, in this case, amounting to up to 15 years of prison for each count of access device fraud and access device fraud 3. Okay, all right, just mostly access device fraud. It seems like they could have charged him with a bunch of other things as well. So maybe just 3 counts of access device fraud is a blessing, even though each one comes with 15 years in prison. So maybe not. All right, so this is kind of a wild story also. And there was some debate about whether or not there was actually exploitation here. This was a UK nuclear site called Sellafield by the public, but called Voldemort by the people in charge of its security, presumably because they don't speak its name. I'm not really sure exactly how far that analogy goes. But they were fined $440,000 US and 332 pounds by the Office for Nuclear Regulation for all sorts of bad things. And this was like 75% of their servers being vulnerable to exploitation, the potential for many bad things to happen based on the state of their security, and ignoring several warnings that this was not in line with their own standards. Disaster waiting to happen is what it was called. So seeing some critical facility like a nuclear facility being known to be in dismal shape when it comes to their own cybersecurity and not meeting their own standards is certainly alarming. And seeing that fines are actually coming out against people who are running these facilities and not holding them to the standards they agreed to is certainly encouraging. The press had alleged that various nation states had penetrated the security at the site and either had backdoors or other things running on it, but the site is insisting that there was no signs of exploitation here. It was just incredibly shoddy and a ticking time bomb. All right, so we talked about the cups vulnerability as it came out. This was something I worried was going to ruin my week, and instead it was relatively quiet, with the exception of the fact that this could be used to, instead of fully compromise a server, just amplify a distributed denial of service attack. So they talked about how this could be used to send a single packet to cause a vulnerable server to then send a flood of traffic to a particular IP address. So the idea is you send a malicious packet, it triggers this into attempting to identify the printer and sending it all this traffic. And then in some cases, it also could cause it to kind of freak out and go into a looped setting where it just sends traffic continuously until the process is killed. So being able to induce this allows you to send a tremendous amount of traffic to specific IP addresses or to specific websites. And possibly relatedly, Cloudflare was reporting a massive distributed denial of service attack that it was able to block. This was something that has never been seen before. It was peaking at 3.8 terabits per second. And, whether or not it had anything to do with the cups vulnerability, allowing suddenly all these servers on the internet to very easily be used to generate traffic without even having to take them over. Is this related? It's unclear. But for 60 seconds, the internet saw one of its most intense sustained distributed denial of service attacks ever. And you can see the breakdown of where these packets were coming from. So it looks like a lot of Russian servers, but then also United States, Brazil, and also Spain randomly. So yeah, interesting to see where the compromised servers were here. But again, you don't necessarily need to compromise a server in order to cause it to create a distributed denial of service attack. And you can see it looks like the spike is like right about here where the most sustained traffic actually happened. But largest publicly recorded volumetric distributed denial of service attack. Write it down in your calendar. Never forget. So again, like obviously a pretty massive attack, and companies like Cloudflare are set up for this. Like they should be able to handle this. But still, I imagine a lot of strain on those networks as they were attempting to deflect this attack. And again, unclear as to whether or not the cups vulnerability had anything to do with this particular firestorm of packets, leading to a pretty impressive distributed denial service attack. All right, so next up, we have the Dutch police saying that it was likely a state actor that was behind a data breach. So that's obviously pretty ominous because when a state actor is spending resources on breaching your specific police agency, it usually means because they have skin in the game. They want to get information about officers, maybe investigations, maybe they want to know, if a source is compromised or if the police are onto a spy of theirs. Like, you know, it's probably some sketchy stuff. But the Dutch National Police are saying that their intelligence agency tipped them off and warned them that the breach associated with the release of lots of very sensitive officer information was very likely due to a nation state intelligence service. So they're saying that they've implemented stronger security measures in the wake of the attack, but obviously getting news that this wasn't just like a cybercrime group or something like that. It was actually a targeted attack by likely an intelligence service of another country is certainly upsetting news. All right, next up, speaking of state-sponsored attacks, we have Microsoft and the Department of Justice trying to disrupt as many FSB hackers' infrastructure as possible. This type of infrastructure is frequently a bunch of compromised servers in the United States or other targeted countries that are used to localize connections. Obviously, spinning up like an attack server and then going after infrastructure or something from like a commercial IP address is going to be something that's suspicious and draws a lot of attention. So as a result, it's very common for intelligence agencies of other countries to take over these botnets or even collaborate with cyber criminals to buy access to botnets that allow them to come out of all these different random places around the country and generate traffic locally that won't trigger like geo restrictions. So the United States is very interested in taking down these types of infrastructure. So as a result, Microsoft and the Department of Justice has seized 107 domains, 66 by Microsoft and 41 by the DOJ, dismantling public attack infrastructure used by Cold River hackers, which have been linked to the Russian FSB. So this is kind of like cybercrime, cyber intelligence, back and forth stuff that happens just about every week. And it's crazy because you'll hear updates from CISA, like talking about like how critical infrastructure needs to update to address the ways that these attackers were breaking in. But yeah, some really interesting breaking stories in the intelligence community around how state-sponsored hackers are targeting companies and what the DOJ is doing to stop them. So this is a really dumb scam, and I don't even know how it worked for so long. But in other cybercrime news, we have two Chinese nationals who are taking advantage of Apple's very generous return policy, where if you buy a phone and something is wrong with it, then they'll allow you to return it for a certain period of time. So what they were doing, I guess, was like cobbling together like broken iPhones that never worked and then spoofing the IMEI number so that when they returned them, they were able to exchange them for real functioning iPhones. So they did this not one time, but 6,000 times, which generated $2.5 million and allowed them to scam Apple out of functioning phones by sending them effectively junk ones with spoofed ID numbers. So this is a pretty audacious scheme. And again, I'm not really sure how they got away with it for so long. 6,000 is a lot of junk iPhones to exchange for real ones, but maybe in the churn of being a giant global corporation, like that just doesn't get noticed for a while. But either way, again, one of those cyber fraud crimes that kind of goes unnoticed, but I thought was one of the more interesting stories this week. All right, so this was a little interesting. Perfect CTL apparently was a type of cryptocurrency mining malware that took extreme measures to hide on Linux servers and workstations for at least 3 years. Levels of evasion it went through were pretty interesting. So when I was looking through the various stories this week, this one kind of piqued my interest because of the ways that this would just desperately attempt to mine for precious cryptocurrency in the background while users were away. But then it would stop doing that. It would start behaving itself as soon as as soon as the user logged in. So it would have extremely high CPU usage anytime it felt like it wouldn't be detected. It established all sorts of persistence to make sure if it was cleaned, then it could come back and attack again. And it leveraged a number of vulnerabilities or just exposed credentials in order to take over servers and then inject itself into them. So somebody was earning passive income off of this for a considerable amount of time, and it was able to be spread by compromised credentials, misconfigured servers, misconfigured logins, and then a couple kind of like unknown infections. And by a couple, I mean 4,647. So you can kind of see the infection paths here, giving you a little bit of a clue of how this was started. But what this would do is just kind of run in the background, communicate with the attacker's server via a Tor relay, and then do all these like seeding tasks in the system, kind of like hiding itself in various places in order to spring back into operation if it was partially deleted. So the evasion mechanisms were pretty advanced here for someone who's just trying to mine some Monero. But the fact that, I mean, this is the type of program that would be loaded via like Luma Stealer, for example, onto a system that's compromised. Once you have a program like this that just makes money if it infects a system and is very difficult to destroy, you can actually pay distributors of Luma Stealer and other sorts of loader software to load this on a percentage of their infected PCs or Linux servers, allowing you to establish a base of servers that are just constantly mining for Monero in this case. So kind of an interesting cybercrime story on this one. Not super remarkable, but just a lot of evasion techniques at work here. All right, so Rackspace apparently had a bunch of monitoring data stolen, and they are arguing about whether or not this is a third-party breach. I think that third-party breach, like declaring a breach to be a third-party breach when it's your data, is a little bit maybe not totally clear about what's going on here. So let's talk about this breach and who is responsible, or at least whose data is out there. So cloud hosting provider Rackspace is saying that there was a data breach exposing, quote, limited customer monitoring data after threat actors exploited a zero-day vulnerability in a third-party tool used by Science Logic SL1 platform. Now, Rackspace uses Science Logic to do analytics on their customers' servers and other sorts of account information that they would want access to. And when they're disclosing this, they're saying, okay, it wasn't our bad. It was a third party we were using that had access to your data. Now, that's not necessarily super comforting because it is still customers' data that's at play here. So whether or not it was a third party that they had integrated, or who's ultimately the one who dropped the ball here, I feel like is kind of like splitting hairs when it comes to more clearly talking about what sort of data was exposed and who it impacts. So yes, this apparently, again, was a third-party zero-day vulnerability, which is difficult, obviously, for a company that's managing a bunch of technologies integrated into their product. They have released a patch, which apparently is now fixing this. But yeah, kind of an interesting breach to watch when we look at language around like, oh, it was a third-party breach, but it was still, you know, your information that was leaked. So possibly more information going to be released on this, but an email sent to customers said that hackers had gained access to limited customer monitoring data, customer account names and numbers, customer usernames, Rackspace's internally generated device IDs, device name and information, IP addresses, and AES encrypted Rackspace internal device agent credentials. Not super comforting there. But the IP addresses are really the thing that's interesting here. Typically, if you have a server, you're going to use something like Cloudflare to protect you against, like, oh, I don't know, massive distributed denial of service attacks. In this case, if the IP addresses were leaked, it could allow attackers to directly attack the IP addresses associated with these services. So this is still not necessarily great news, even though it's not, you know, something like plain text passwords. Oh, speaking of plain text passwords, sorry, let me get the lead in for this story. Ireland is fining Meta 91 million euros for storing user passwords in plain text. So this violates a bunch of different provisions of GDPR, those including notification of a personal data breach, documentation of a personal data breach, integrity and confidentiality. They did not implement adequate security measures to ensure the protection of users' passwords. They were stored in plain text and they lacked encryption. And also Article 32, security of processing, failed to implement appropriate technical and organizational measures to protect the passwords, such as encryption, which would have maintained the confidentiality of the data. So while they did get a massive fine, there was no evidence of these passwords being exposed. So apparently once they were discovered, they were eventually reported, and that's when the investigation kind of began here. But lots of Instagram users and lots of Facebook users had their passwords exposed in plain text, and apparently this was accessible to people within the company when it should not have been. So that is what you get when you fail to encrypt. Yeah, lots going on there. All right, we are just about to be out of time, but we've got a little bit more for some stories here. We've got another hospital ransomware attack that I wanted to mention. Obviously, these attacks have kind of increased in frequency, and we've talked about them a number of times on the stream. And this is another ransomware attack that is causing this Texas-based healthcare provider to have to divert patients to other facilities for emergency and non-emergency procedures. The statement says they have recently detected unusual activity within their IT systems. Immediately after detecting the activity, our teams launched an investigation, took steps to proactively disconnect our system to contain the incident. Those of us in the game here know that that means ransomware. Throughout the ongoing investigation, we determined that the unusual activity was connected to a ransomware incident. Oh, okay, they actually just said it. Good. I thought most companies would just stop right there and then not explicitly say it. So as of right now, no ransomware group is claiming responsibility. So it's unknown exactly who did it, but this is the only level 1 trauma center within 400 miles in the Lubbock, Texas area. So obviously this is a very critical facility. Having it go offline or have difficulty accessing medical information is going to cause huge problems there. So stay tuned for more information on this story. All right, I'm being very choosy about which topics I cover now since we've got limited time. This one is crazy. All right, I'm glad that I saw this one again. All right, so what if you were able to gain access to all sorts of companies' data? There's obviously all sorts of crimes you could commit. Some of the more obvious, blatant ones are, ransomware attacks, or stealing information and threatening to leak it. Those are the two most common. But there's other crimes out there. Don't worry. The creativity of hackers never ends. So what if you decided that you didn't want to make a big splash here? You just wanted to quietly trade on the back end and make $3.7 million in profit by trading on information that was not publicly available. So if you were able to reset the accounts of executives, go in there, rummage around in their emails, and then just dip, what would you do? In this case, it looked like a man was able to basically do that, log into the email accounts of executives at major companies. And rather than, do any of the attacks we've seen before, like spear phishing or attempting to steal check information, he just quietly observed the earning reports. He would set up forwarding rules and forward information with certain key phrases to a secondary email account, and then go through that information and try to find any details that would allow him to make money doing financial trades. So in spite of trying to anonymize this and make it so that they were traded under a different name, he still slipped up and was able to be detected via, I think it said analytics. It was not very specific about how we're able to do this, but the SEC charged him with violating the anti-fraud provisions of the Security Exchange Act, which is a very Martha Stewart offense. So in this, again, pretty crazy story, being able to gain access to the email addresses of many very important people, this guy really thought that he could turn around and then just trade on that information and basically expect that nobody would figure it out. Unfortunately, when you make $3.7 million off of information that's not supposed to be public, and you just have the intuition to just know, the SEC is apparently going to figure that out via just data analytics. I guess that not that many people just intuitively know when a bunch of things are about to happen, and then take the exact appropriate and to the most extreme stock position you can based on knowing that information. So got a little bit overconfident here and got caught, but still, I think this is the only time I've seen a case of insider trading as a result of hacking someone and then taking no further action other than just trying to trade on the information discreetly. So if it was your master plan as a hacker, turns out the SEC has analytics that could potentially trip you up. All right, so this one affects me personally. So I talk a lot about insecure Wi-Fi networks, and Microsoft Defender is adding the capability to automatically notify you when you connect to one. So this could mean an open Wi-Fi network or another type of network that is going to cause you issues if you attempt to maybe do something secure, and then somebody is able to get in the middle and start manipulating it. So that could be hotel Wi-Fi, coffee shop Wi-Fi. This is going to detect that it has no password, that it's not encrypted, and then it is going to try to offer you to connect to a VPN, basically. I don't necessarily object to that. Like, I think that in general, if you're connected to an open Wi-Fi network, I would generally tell people that to protect themselves against snooping by local hackers or by people who are in the same area as you, then the best thing you could do is to like turn on a VPN and try to encrypt the traffic that you're sending over the network in a place you don't fully trust. So I'm not mad at this, honestly. I think that this little pop-up that says you're connected to an insecure network, turn on VPN, that doesn't bother me, actually. So I think this is generally like a positive step. How they qualify like a suspicious network, like they might have some other interesting ways of doing this, and they don't really go into much detail in the announcement. So I'm dig into this more because I am genuinely curious as to the ways that Microsoft is trying to detect suspicious or like sketchy Wi-Fi networks. I think that that's really cool, and being able to successfully detect and respond to those is something I'm looking forward to. Speaking of companies paying absolutely massive fines for mismanaging company data or customer data, we have the FCC issuing a $31.5 million fine over 4 different data breaches we've actually covered here before, stemming from T-Mobile. This is the result of multiple types of misconfigurations and other breaches that allowed hackers to extract lots of information. This caused many Americans to have their data exposed and be subjected to increased scams and other sorts of personally targeted attempts to steal their information. So the FCC is finally cracking down on that. They found that T-Mobile is going to need to do lots of things to enhance their privacy, data security, and cybersecurity practices, and laid out a series of steps that they need to comply with in order to comply with this settlement. So adopting multi-factor authentication across company systems seems like a really obvious one to me, but it seems like it's going to take this big fine in order to actually make that happen over at T-Mobile. All right, let's see if there's other critical ones I want to cover this week. I think that is mostly it, except for this update on Windows Recall. So we covered Windows Recall before. It was not popular amongst hackers. So if you don't remember what Windows Recall was, sorry. If you don't recall what Windows Recall was, it was basically an agent that would take screenshots over time of whatever it was you were doing and stitch them together and allow you to do all sorts of like searches through it. It would allow you to like pull those up via like a large language model and like a natural search, and basically provide like a history of everything you've done on your computer outside the browser, just like basically what you were doing at any given point. So maybe you could restore back to that point or get information about a specific thing, asking this model that trains on the data. People really didn't like that. They did not want the information going off of the device. They really wanted this information to instead on the computer if it was going to be there at all. So Windows has now made it so you have to opt into this. The information is stored locally. It's encrypted. It requires you to authenticate if you want to access the data. And there's other opt-outs included, like opting out of specific programs and other things that you don't want included in that. So if you actually think that this feature might be useful, but you have a lot of things that you don't like about it, then this might actually be the compromise you're looking for in terms of giving you the raw access to determine what you do and do not want to do. So yeah, they've really thought about a lot of different threat models. They've hardened the security to prevent people from using some of the most common attacks to break into the data that would be stored there. So while I still wouldn't be using the service myself, I still think that it's worth taking a look at the way that they've kind of re-engineered this in response to the uproar around them kind of rushing this product out initially. All right, so that's about all we have. Infinite history, what's not to like? Yeah, I don't know about that. So that's all we have for this week's episode. I know that some of you came in a little bit late, so if you want to check out the demo that I did in the beginning, I covered using Burp Suite to do a little bit of the kind of cloud security research that we do on the Varonis Threat Labs team. So that means checking out servers, starting to probe around and see if they're vulnerable, and starting to see if we can manipulate requests from the client side to see if we can get the server to do some interesting things. We talked a little bit about the shared security model and how we might be able to take advantage of a misconfigured bash script that doesn't properly sanitize user input to basically inject OS level commands and take over a system from the operating system level. So if you want to check that out, it's the beginning of the stream. And also, I'm sure we'll do a cutout on it. And of course, we put out a bunch of great cutouts this week. So make sure to check out the Security Forward channel for some of the cutouts from the stream covering topics that kind of went viral. All right, so if you want to support the stream, as always, you can go to varonis.com/Kody, and it will let everyone at Varonis know you like the stream, you want to support us, and you want us to keep going live twice a week, every week. And of course, you can check me out next week on Wednesday, where I will be here to answer your hacking-related questions and probably some other random questions as well. If you want to make sure that I see your question, you can always leave it on the Security Forward YouTube channel, and you can also leave it on our Discord server as well. All right, everyone, have a great weekend, and I will see everybody next week. Goodbye, everyone.